Scientists are investigating shocking footage from Antarctica showing a mysterious giant pale humanoid creature beneath the Southern Ocean.
Somewhere beyond the southern edge of the world, where the ocean turns almost completely black and the horizon disappears into endless storms, a camera was recording something nobody expected to see. The vessel was moving through the freezing waters of the Southern Ocean, thousands of miles away from civilization, when the crew noticed something unusual beneath the surface. At first, it looked like another piece of drifting ice, a pale shape floating silently in the darkness. But then it moved. Not with the push of the waves, not with the pull of the current. It moved with direction, with purpose. The camera continued rolling as the enormous white shape slowly passed through the water, leaving behind a question that would spread across the world. What exactly had they witnessed? Before we go any further, please subscribe to our channel and help us reach our goal of 5,000 subscribers. The footage was unclear. The water was dark, the object was distant, but the silhouette was unlike anything the observers expected. It appeared too large to be a known animal, too strangely shaped to be ordinary ice, and too human-like to ignore. The people who encountered the story gave it a name that would later become one of the Internet's most disturbing ocean legends, the Ningen. The legend did not begin with a scientific discovery. It began with scattered reports, anonymous posts, and stories passed between people who claimed to have worked in the remote waters around Antarctica. But what made the story survive for decades was not one photograph or one video. It was something much harder to dismiss, the strange similarity between separate accounts. Different people, different ships, different years, yet the descriptions often returned to the same impossible image, a gigantic pale figure moving beneath the Antarctic waves. To understand why this story captured so many imaginations, you first have to understand the ocean itself. The Southern Ocean is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. It surrounds Antarctica in a continuous circle of water, creating one of the most powerful ocean systems on the planet. Unlike other oceans, there is no continent blocking the constant movement of wind and waves. Storms can travel thousands of miles without interruption, building enormous swells that can challenge even the strongest research vessels. The water itself is unforgiving. Temperatures remain just above freezing, and survival in the open sea is measured not in hours, but in minutes. A person falling into these waters would face rapid hypothermia, as the cold begins affecting the body almost immediately. There are no nearby cities, no fishing villages, no rescue stations waiting over the horizon. There is only endless ocean. For the crews who work there, the isolation creates an atmosphere unlike anywhere else on Earth. During long missions, sailors and researchers describe moments when the engines slow, the winds disappear, and the silence becomes overwhelming. In those rare moments, surrounded by thousands of miles of empty water, the human mind begins searching for movement, patterns, and explanations. And that is where the mystery begins. Because the truth behind the Ningen story is complicated. There is no confirmed specimen, no verified biological sample, no scientific paper proving that a massive unknown humanoid creature exists beneath Antarctic waters. Marine biologists have not identified any species matching the descriptions. By the standards of modern science, the creature remains unconfirmed. But the legend refuses to disappear. Over the years, reports continued appearing from people who claimed to have seen something unusual in the Southern Ocean. The most interesting part was not the claim itself. It was the consistency. Many accounts described a similar shape, a large white body, a rounded upper section resembling a head and shoulders, and long structures extending beneath it. The name itself added another layer to the mystery. Ningen is a Japanese word meaning human being. It was not a name created to describe a traditional sea monster. It was not kraken, serpent, or leviathan. It was a word connected to humanity itself. And that detail changed everything. A strange object in the ocean is frightening. But an object that appears to resemble us creates a completely different reaction. The human brain is designed to recognize faces and bodies. It searches for familiar shapes everywhere, even in darkness and uncertainty. A shadow becomes a person. A rock becomes a face. A cloud becomes something alive. But what happens when the shape appears in the most isolated ocean on Earth? That is where the Ningen legend found its power. To investigate the mystery, researchers first had to examine the environment where these sightings supposedly occurred. Oceanographers studying Antarctic waters have repeatedly shown that the deep sea remains one of Earth's least explored frontiers. While humans have mapped distant planets and photographed the surface of the Moon, large sections of Earth's own ocean floor remain poorly understood. The reason is not secrecy, it is difficulty. The pressure in deep water can crush equipment designed for exploration. Extreme cold damages technology. Constant storms make long-term observation almost impossible. Many areas of the Southern Ocean are visited only by specialized research vessels, and even those missions cover only small portions of the enormous region. This lack of observation creates a strange situation. The ocean is not empty. It is full of life. Scientists continue discovering new species, especially in deep environments where sunlight never reaches. For centuries, sailors told stories about enormous creatures beneath the waves. Many were dismissed as myths. The giant squid, once considered a legendary sea monster, eventually became a confirmed animal after scientists recovered evidence and filmed living specimens in their natural environment. Deep-sea exploration has repeatedly shown that reality can be stranger than imagination. So, could the Southern Ocean hide unknown creatures? Absolutely. But the next question is much more difficult. Could it hide a creature tens of meters long, shaped like a human, moving near ships, surfacing repeatedly, and leaving behind no confirmed physical evidence? That is where the mystery becomes harder to explain. Because the same environment that allows unknown creatures to exist also makes large animals difficult to keep hidden. A massive creature regularly appearing near vessels would eventually leave evidence. Scientists would expect encounters, photographs, biological traces, or remains. And yet, none have been confirmed. This is the central conflict behind the Ningen mystery. The ocean is vast enough to inspire endless possibilities, but science demands evidence. The believers point to the unexplored depths. They argue that history has repeatedly shown humans underestimate what exists beneath the surface. The skeptics point to biology, probability, and the absence of physical proof. Both sides agree on one thing. The Southern Ocean is one of the last truly mysterious places on Earth. And perhaps that is why the story continues. Because the Ningen legend is not only about a creature, it is about the unknown. It is about standing at the edge of the world, looking into an endless black ocean, and wondering whether something is looking back. Something enormous, something unfamiliar, or perhaps something that feels familiar enough to be even more frightening. A shape beneath the waves, a face in the darkness, and a question humanity has asked since the beginning of exploration. What else is still out there, waiting to be discovered? The ocean keeps its secrets for one plain reason. Almost no one is ever there. The water is too violent to sit and watch, too cold to linger in, and too far from anywhere for a casual eye to ever wander past. The Southern Ocean is not a place where humans simply arrive and explore at their convenience. It is a place that pushes back. Storms can appear without warning, waves can rise higher than buildings, and a vessel can travel for days through endless water without seeing another ship, another coastline, or another sign of human life. Unlike forests, deserts, or mountains, where every generation can slowly expand the boundaries of exploration, this ocean remains one of the last places on Earth where nature still controls access. For most of human history, only a small number of working crews ever experienced this environment firsthand. They were not travelers looking for adventure or people chasing legends. They were scientists, sailors, marine researchers, and specialists who spent months away from civilization, collecting data from one of the harshest regions on the planet. They measured ice movement, tracked marine animals, studied ocean temperatures, and recorded changes in a world where a simple mistake could become dangerous within seconds. There is no conspiracy of silence. There is only absence. The reason there is no perfect photograph of something like the Ningen is not because someone is hiding the truth. It is because almost nobody has ever been in the right place, at the right moment, with the right equipment. A strange shape appearing in the Southern Ocean may exist for only a few seconds before disappearing beneath the waves. A storm can cover the horizon. A camera can be pointing in another direction. A research vessel can travel hundreds of miles through empty water without ever encountering something unusual. So, when people ask why there is no clear image, no undeniable recording, and no confirmed specimen, the answer is much simpler than many expect. It comes down to opportunity. The ocean is enormous, and the number of people watching it is incredibly small. The men who saw. This is where the story becomes more complicated, because the accounts that created the Ningen legend did not come from people with no understanding of the sea. They were not drunk passengers leaning over a cruise ship railing. They were not teenagers creating an internet mystery. The stories came from people who claimed to have spent years working in some of the most difficult waters on Earth. Whale researchers who followed migration patterns through freezing seas. Fisheries observers who spent long periods recording marine activity. Survey teams who documented ice conditions, ocean currents, and environmental changes. These were people whose daily lives depended on accurately understanding what was happening around them. They were experienced observers. They measured their knowledge not in vacations or occasional trips, but in seasons, in winters, in years spent away from home. The Southern Ocean was not an unfamiliar place to them. It was their workplace. They understood its moods. They knew how the waves behaved before a storm arrived. They knew the difference between floating ice and a living animal. They knew how whales moved, how seals surfaced, and how shadows changed beneath the water depending on the light. They could read the ocean the way someone reads a familiar face. Think about what years of observation does to a person's eyes. A scientist who has spent a decade studying whales does not look at the surface the same way an ordinary person does. A small disturbance in the distance is not just a random splash. It is information. The shape of a wave, the pattern of movement, the timing of a breath, all of it tells a story. Someone with that level of experience can often identify a whale species from the shape of its spray alone. They can recognize whether a dark object is a piece of debris, a shadow, or an animal, before most people would even notice something is there. Their entire profession depends on observation, on accuracy, on not confusing one thing for another. That is why the reports connected to the Ningen continue to attract attention. When inexperienced people describe something strange, it is easy to dismiss. But when experienced observers, separated by distance and time, describe something unusual in similar ways, people naturally want to understand why. Different vessels, different crews, different years. Yet the same strange details appear again and again. A massive pale shape, a body-like outline, movement that seemed different from ordinary ice or known marine animals. And according to many versions of the story, the witnesses often did not know about the Ningen legend before their encounters. They were not searching for a monster. They were not expecting anything unusual. They were simply watching the ocean when something appeared that did not fit into anything they already knew. And every account begins with a similar moment. A quiet watch, a dark horizon, a single person standing at the edge of a ship, staring into the endless water. Before anyone else sees it, before anyone else can confirm or deny what is happening, there is only one observer and one impossible shape. How it begins. The moment happens during the strange half-darkness of polar twilight. It is not completely night, but it is not truly day either. It is a gray world where the boundary between ocean and sky almost disappears. The clouds, the water, and the ship itself seem to blend together into one endless landscape of faded color. The kind of light where the eyes struggle to find details. The kind of light where a person can stare directly at something and still wonder whether they are seeing reality or an illusion. The cold has already taken control of the man standing at the railing. After hours outside, it is no longer something he notices. It has become part of his body, a deep stiffness in his fingers, a pressure in his face, a constant reminder that he is standing in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. His mind has entered the quiet rhythm of a long watch. The body continues working, but the thoughts slow down. He is simply waiting for someone to replace him. Then he notices something, a pale shape, low in the water, off the bow. At first, there is nothing frightening about it. In fact, his first thought is completely ordinary. Ice. Of course, it is ice. The Southern Ocean is filled with floating fragments carried away from Antarctica. Pale shapes drifting beneath the surface are common. He has seen them countless times before. There is no reason to be alarmed, no reason to stop, no reason to think this moment will be remembered years later. So, he looks away. He checks an instrument. He records information. He wipes freezing spray from his face. Only a few seconds pass. Then he looks back. And something is wrong. The pale shape is no longer where it should be. At first, he assumes he made a mistake. Maybe the waves moved it. Maybe the wind changed direction. Maybe the darkness confused his sense of distance. But then he notices the detail that changes everything. It did not drift. It moved. The shape crossed his view in a way that floating ice should not. It was not being pushed randomly by the ocean. It was holding a direction. Slowly, steadily, like it had somewhere to go. And the most disturbing part was the way it seemed to move against the current. Against the current. That detail became the center of the entire legend. Because ice does not choose a path. Ice does not decide where it wants to travel. It simply follows the forces around it. The wind pushes it. The waves carry it. The ocean controls it. But this shape appeared different. It held its line. It moved as if something inside it was making a decision. And that is the one thing the human mind struggles to ignore. A strange object in darkness can be explained. A shadow can become a shape. A reflection can become a creature. A tired brain can create patterns where none exist. The human mind has been doing this for thousands of years. It is designed to search for faces, movements, and danger. Seeing something that is not there was often safer than failing to see something that was. But intention is different. Because once a person believes something is choosing where to go, it stops feeling like an object. It starts feeling alive. The sailor could tell himself it was a strange piece of ice. He could explain it as a reflection. He could blame exhaustion, distance, or poor visibility. And maybe, most of the time, that explanation would be correct. A person would blink, look again, and the ocean would return to being only the ocean. But according to the witnesses who told these stories, this moment felt different, because the shape did not simply move. It appeared to decide. And once that thought entered their minds, the question changed forever. It was no longer, "What am I seeing?" It became, "What is it doing?" What the witnesses say truly unsettled them was never the size, never the color, and not even the shape. It was the sense of purpose. It was not what it looked like. It was what it seemed to want. And want is the word that ends a man's ability to sleep. A piece of ice does not want anything. A current does not want anything. The entire cold machinery of that ocean, the wind, the swell, and the freezing black water, none of it wants. It simply moves. It follows the rules of nature without intention, without direction, without thought. But the instant a man becomes certain that the pale thing below him wanted something, he crosses a line he cannot easily step back over. Somewhere beneath logic and reason, the human brain makes a decision. It is no longer just an object. It is alive. It is aware. It is choosing. And that thought is far more disturbing than the shape itself. Because a strange object in the darkness can be explained. A shadow can be explained. A reflection can be explained. A tired mind can create patterns where none exist. But intention is different. Once something appears to have a purpose, the mind stops seeing it as a thing. It starts seeing it as a presence. And then the man does something that changes the entire encounter. He does not keep it to himself. He does not quietly walk away and convince himself that exhaustion created an illusion. He grabs the nearest crew member. He points across the black water and asks the question that every witness wants answered. "Do you see that too?" A second person comes to the railing, sometimes a third, and together they stand in the brutal Antarctic cold, shoulder to shoulder, their breath forming white clouds in the freezing air, watching the same pale shape move silently through the water. A single witness can be mistaken. A single person can misjudge distance, light, or movement. But several people, awake, sober, experienced, and watching the same thing at the same moment, create a much harder mystery. They talked about it afterward. They argued about it. They replayed every second in their minds. But the thing they debated most was not whether something was there. It was the shape. Because the shape was wrong. The wrong shape. These were people who knew whales. And that detail changes everything. For people working in the Southern Ocean, whales were not mysterious creatures from another world. They were familiar. They were animals they had studied, followed, photographed, and observed for years. They had watched humpback whales rise from the surface with enormous waves rolling from their backs. They knew the movement of minke whales as they surfaced for a breath. They recognized the massive dark shape of a right whale resting in the water like a floating piece of rock. Every known animal had a pattern, a rhythm, a recognizable way of moving. A whale rises, it breathes, it dives, and the body follows the head in one smooth, predictable motion. There was nothing mysterious about that to an experienced observer.